Whenever. I need Anthony to turn my mute off, I think.
Do you want to be on the record, Chairman?
There we go. Yeah.
You're on.
All right, good morning. We're on the record in case number 2022-00096, electronic application of Telesto Energy Project LLC for a certificate of construction for an approximately 110 megawatt merchant electric solar generating facility in Hardin County, Kentucky. My name is Kent Chandler. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission and also chairman of the Kentucky State Board on Electric Generation and Transmission Siting, and will be presiding over the hearing today. Joining me in person is Public Service Commissioner Mary Pat Regan, and joining us remotely is Deputy Secretary of the Energy and Environment Cabinet John Lyons as proxy for Secretary Rebecca Goodman, and Sydney Montgomery serving as proxy for Jeff Knoll, Secretary of the Cabinet for Economic Development. I believe that Mr. Hinton and Mr. Waddell are watching this remotely, but may join and participate, but are certainly watching this remotely. At this time, I'd caution attendees, since we have both folks in person and remotely. In person, certainly please turn off your cell phones or silence them. For those participating remotely, I just ask that you keep your microphone on mute until it's your time to speak. And that if you use a phone for audio and a computer for video, please turn off the computer audio. Also, please alert the siting board staff or counsel for the siting board if at any time technology keeps you from participating in the proceedings. All right. So the hearing today is for the purpose of taking evidence in this case. We'll start off with an entry of appearance of counsel, and given the fact that we're doing this partly in person and remotely, I'd ask that counsel, when you do your entry of appearance, that you, or enter your appearance, that you also present your witnesses that are here and remote. So for the applicant.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Gregory Dutton with the law firm Frost Brown Todd. I have with me today my colleague who's also with Frost Brown Todd, Pierre Stevenson. For witnesses today, we have Jack Steele, Chad Martin, Hannah Cooney. They are here in person. And then we have virtually appearing Dr. Yosef Shirazi.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Dutton. And for siting board,
Heather Temple and Justin Young.
I reviewed the record this morning, Mr. Dutton. It looks like public notice was given on October 25th, and evidence of the same was filed into the record. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And counsel, are there any outstanding motions?
There are not.
All right. So we had nobody that, excuse me, the public notice indicated that those wishing to make oral public comments could do so by following the instructions listed on the Public Service Commission website. Those have been up since yesterday afternoon, actually yesterday morning. Nobody has indicated their interest in providing remote public comments. So if there's anybody in the room here this morning that would like to provide public comments, you can do so by walking up to the microphone and indicating your name and address. Seeing nobody make their way to the microphone, I'll just remind folks that may be viewing this in live or after the fact that you can provide public comments on any case that's in front of the Public Service Commission or the siting board by a number of different ways. The first way is that you can email comments to the Public Service Commission by sending them to psc.comment@ky.gov. We ask that in providing your comment, you include your name, your address, and that you also indicate the case number that you'd like the public comment to be put in. The case number in this matter, just to remind you, is case number 2022-0096. You can also mail written public comments to the Public Service Commission. You can mail those to 211 Sower, S-O-W-E-R Boulevard, Frankfort, Kentucky, 40601. And then finally, you can provide public comments through our website, psc.ky.gov. Again, we ask that when you provide public comments, you include your name, your address, and the case number, which is 2022-0096. All right, if there's nothing else, Mr. Dutton, you can call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Our first witness is Mr. Jack Steele.
Mr. Steele, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jack Steele, 1337 45th Avenue, San Francisco, California,
Do you know the zip code?
94122.
Great. Mr. Dutton, you may ask.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, who do you work for?
Light Source BP,
And what is your title?
Senior Development Manager.
And what was your role with this project?
I am the project development lead, so the development team does everything from land acquisition, lease execution, environmental permitting, some interconnection, and then we work closely with our construction and engineering group and finance team once the project is passed to finance and then construction management.
Did you assist with producing responses to discovery and other documents and reports that were entered into the record in this case?
I did.
Is there anything in the record that you would like to clarify, modify, or update at this time?
Yes, there are three things that I would like to update/clarify. The first has to do with our design. So we had initially, with our initial application, submitted a 5% design set. We then, subsequent to that, filed in the public record a 10% design set. The thing that I'd like to clarify is that 10% design set, it shows panel placements and fenced area. It also shows the boundary of the area that we would like to be approved. So the fenced area of the project, as shown on the current design set, which is the 10% design set, is about 555 acres. What we're looking to approve is about 630 acres. The reason for that is we don't yet have a contractor on board. We're only at 10% design. There are many stages of design yet to come. There are certain things that we need to take into account that our EPC contractor will take into account, and we need to allow for that additional space for later stage design for unforeseen constraints that may arise.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. You said there were three things?
Yeah, the second has to do with our substation location, and when I say substation, I mean our project collection substation. So everywhere where our medium voltage electric collection lines feed into and step up to our interconnecting voltage, that substation in the current 10% design that we submitted is shown just to the east of Pritchard Parkway, which is just to the east.
If I
of
may,
our-
Mr. Steele, is there a map that would sort of help explain this?
There is, I believe you have it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, is it the 10% design plan?
What I was gonna do is I was gonna draw attention to the supplemental response to first request, so it's basically the first supplemental. And there is a map in there that shows exactly where the substation is currently proposed. It's a map just of the substation.
Okay.
If you've got one that's different, you can look at that, but I was gonna provide him with this, if that's all
I
right.
just had copies of the 10% design plan, so I didn't know if that would work.
It should work.
think it should.
I can't see what you're holding up, but
If you'll allow us just a moment, I'll pull up the map that you're looking at so he can look at the same thing.
Thanks.
It's these two. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Yeah, that's two maps here. Okay. Just let us know which one you want to look at.
yeah, so if you look at the current 10% design, either version, there are two versions, one that shows what our environmental constraints are land carve-outs, the other doesn't show those. To my previous point, what I was referring to in terms of the area that we are seeking approval, it is all the areas boundaried, outlined by that red boundary. What I'm referring to as the substation location is in the bottom right of that map. There's something labeled substation, which is near the POI, the point of interconnection. That's the EKPC point of interconnection where we're plugging into the transmission grid, essentially. That substation location will change. So currently, we're showing it just to the east, very proximal to that POI. It, at this point, most likely will be shifting to the north. We're finalizing agreements to do that. Those documents are not yet executed or complete, but we intend for the substation to be just north of that POI. It's similarly proximal, just to the north. So we will ultimately bring our transmission line, which is my third point, to that point of interconnection from the substation location, which will be different than the one shown on the 10% design. But we will file in the record that substation location as soon as those documents are finalized.
Thank you for that clarification. You said there was a third item as well?
Yes, the third item is very related to that substation location. We have not yet filed an application for our transmission line. We are doing everything we can to finalize the agreements to put that in place. Once all those agreements are finalized, we will submit that application immediately. We expect that to be complete, hopefully within the next month or so.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn to the witness.
Yes, Tim?
Yes. If any questions that I ask, you feel would be better for one of the other witnesses, just let me know. But first, I wanted to ask, have you all completed a phase 1 environmental assessment?
We have. And that, I guess I should clarify that phase 1 environmental assessment is for the site area shown within solar panels.
Okay. And could you please provide that as a post-hearing data request?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the answer to the first one. Is it completed?
It is completed.
Have you all had any discussions with the Kentucky Office of State Archaeology or the Kentucky Heritage Council about any potential areas of significance on the site?
We have, but I'm better to answer that question is Chad Martin,
Okay.
who is another witness here.
And then I have some questions about the landscape planning. Would that also be better for Mr. Martin, or?
I'll do my best, and I'll
Okay.
defer any specific questions to him if they arise.
Could you please provide the list of species that you all anticipate for the vegetative buffer?
We have filed in the record a list of species that we believe will be sufficient. We seek to plant some mixture of evergreen trees and shrubs to help mitigate any impact to the view shed. We have not yet made a final selection as to which species we will utilize for the screening, but we will, as soon as that selection is made, we can make that submitted to the record.
Okay. And do you believe that would include 2 acres of native pollinators?
Yes, that will include at least 2 acres of native pollinators.
Okay.
We strive to maximize the amount of area that we're planting in native pollinators that are good for native species. In this case, we're also evaluating the potential for high-value pollinators, which acts as kind of a set-aside pollinator garden, if you will.
Okay. And when are you proposing that the vegetative screening is done during construction? So at the beginning, at the end, as construction moves throughout the site, how is that planned?
Yes, all vegetative screening will be planted and in place by the time the project is in operations. So once we're producing power, essentially, it will start at some point within the construction timeline.
And could you talk about some of the public involvement or public communications that you've had during the planning of the project? Specifically, any discussions that you've had with non-participating landowners about concerns with the project?
Sure. Yeah, first and foremost, we have done a lot of public engagement. We had our public meeting, which is required as a part of this application and hearing process. That went really well. We had it local in Elizabethtown. There was notice to that published multiple times in advance of that meeting. We had representation from across our team, probably one of the best well-attended ones I've been to. There are probably 15 of us. They're available to answer questions. We had materials relating to all aspects of the projects there available to the public, both for viewing and for taking away. And we had a good turnout. I would say probably 40, 50 people that filtered through the event. In addition to that, we have had public hangouts with the folks from the neighboring communities. So we threw multiple ice cream socials. We got a local ice cream provider to set up shop, and we made notice to the folks in the neighborhoods. And when I say neighborhoods, I mean the two that are closest to the project, to come out, meet with the team, kind of chat about what we're doing, and take any feedback from those folks as to things that they're concerned about, or things that we could do to kind of maybe even help further mitigate impact to the view or anything like that, even though it is very minimal from those areas. And that invite was extended to everyone who's anywhere near the project. So that was some very good engagement. And other than that, we've made ourselves very available in the form of going to Rotary Club meetings, and meeting with other people throughout the community. And
so did any of those people express concerns and requested changes to any of the design?
There were no explicit requests for changes to the design. I think it's very normal for people to be, at least preliminarily concerned, or at least interested in change that's going to happen near to them. So I would say, everyone comes with a list of questions, and for the most part, I think by the time they leave, they're fairly satisfied with how we've planned. We're setting back from houses really far. We've got screening plans that we could point to that I think help make most folks feel a lot better about what's going on.
In one of the responses to an information request, it was discussed that there is a gas storage field within the project boundaries, and that some conversations had been had with the city of Elizabethtown about what needs to be done to make sure there's no damage to that gas storage field. Have you finished up those discussions, and what was the outcome of it? What needs to be done to make sure nothing is damaged?
Yes, we've had multiple discussions with the city of Elizabethtown about those. The storage wells themselves are very deep underground. I think, they've cited 900 or 1,000 feet beneath the surface. So nothing that we're doing on the surface impacts any of their use of those wells, and they've made that explicitly clear to us. The one thing that we do need to be cognizant of is there are a few observation wells that they have to observe what they're doing with those storage wells on the surface where we're building the solar facility. So the city has made it clear sort of what expectations they have around maintaining access to those observation wells and maintaining access such that they can, do any repairs or visitation that they need to those wells.
And has that been taken into consideration in the site plan?
In the 10% site plan that you see in front of you, it is not taken into account. It will be taken into account in the next iteration of the design that you see. The reason it wasn't taken into account is because we, at this point of producing this 10% design, didn't yet have the specifications of access requirements and setback requirements from those wells from the city. Those are very clearly understood at this point.
Okay. And likewise, there is also a crude oil pipeline owned by Energy Transfer Partners. And in one of the responses to a request for information, it was noted that there had been contact with them, but has that been finalized now? And are the requirements for that, have they been discussed?
They have not yet been finalized, but we are in discussions with Energy Transfer Partners, and they're the owners managers of that Mid-Valley pipeline that you're referencing. We have worked with them before, and we now, we have all of their technical specification requirements in hand, and our work, basically you need plan and profile drawings to submit to get crossing agreements from the pipeline owner. The only thing that we're doing is crossing beneath that pipeline with some medium voltage lines and over that pipeline with some roads, and that's fairly light touch, but they will need all those materials before they'll issue a crossing consent, essentially, but that's in process.
Okay. And kind of along the same lines about the P&L Railway. It was also stated that there had been some discussions with them. Has that been finalized, and do you have those requirements?
Similarly, those have been in discussion for quite some time. Similarly, not yet finalized, but we are close. We're working through a third party called Rail Pros, which has relationships with all of these railroads and is very familiar with their requirements and sort of timing of submittal of those requirements. So we've exchanged and submitted plan and profile drawings and information of the like, and are basically just awaiting final sign off and agreement and for consent to cross.
Okay. And you all are not expecting to use the railway in any way for
No.
construction or delivery? Okay.
No.
And then also, it was noted that the stormwater pollution prevention plan had not been completed. Has that been done yet?
No, that has not been complete. That's an item that Hannah Cooney, who is also a witness here, can speak more to, but I'll just say high level, that's something that's completed much closer to construction once we have final civil design sets and that sort of thing.
Okay. And then one last question about approvals. It was stated that you all had been in contact with the Kentucky Airport Zoning Commission. Have they finalized any required permits or any studies related to the airfield?
Yes, at this point, we have reached out to them and made them aware of our project and facilities. There are no solar panels planned on the airport property or anything like that, and they have responded that they have no issue and don't need to issue any formal permit or anything like that. So that's the current status.
Okay. And in one of the responses to a request for information, it was stated that you all do not have an anticipated start date for construction yet. Could you give an update about that?
Yeah, we have a construction schedule that has been provided and I think subsequently updated fairly recently. That includes an anticipated construction start date, mobilization date, and commercial operation date, which means basically the date that we start producing power. And Hannah Cooney, who is the construction project manager, can speak more to that piece.
Okay. And then, so I have a few other questions about the construction process. Do you think she would be better for those as well?
Most likely.
Okay. So then, also sort of related to construction is, I have some questions about noise and noise during the construction period. Specifically, in the response to the consultant's report, it was stated that Telesto is committed to using sound suppressing techniques during pile driving that have proven to be effective at suppressing the noise generated by pile driving. Could you please explain what those effective techniques are?
Yes, and I'll caveat, I will answer this one. Most of the noise questions will go to Chad Martin, who produced the noise study. But as it relates to sound suppression, we, for the most part, or in all cases, we are set back at least 450 feet from any home. And more than that in most cases, and much more than that in terms of sensitive noise receptors. There are very few locations where the amount of noise generated by construction activities are of any level of concern. So the first point there being, those are very limited areas. We will be in those areas for a very short period of time during construction, but we are committed to taking steps to mitigate any impactful noise production during construction. I think it's mixed in terms of what sort of noise suppression techniques are successful at mitigating those impacts. So we've suggested planting in those locations, planting those vegetative screening buffers earlier in the construction process, such that those are in place in a few of those distinct locations prior to the construction activities producing those noise levels.
So the vegetative buffer is the only sound mitigation that you all are planning?
At this point, that is the only one we have proposed.
Okay. And what other sound mitigation measures has LightSource BP used on previous projects?
I am not aware of any other noise suppression techniques that we've used other than vegetative screening.
And then I have some questions about some specific sound receptors and how close they are. Would those be better for Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Okay. So in the application, it was stated that the PJM feasibility study and the system impact study have been completed and those were attached to the application. Has the PJM facility study or the LG&E affected system study been completed?
Those have not yet been completed. I know that EKPC has completed their facilities study, but they have not yet furnished us with it. PJM issued, basically because EKPC submits it to PJM, PJM submits it to us subsequent to that. PJM issued us a delay notice recently. We had expected to have our facilities study by now, but we have not yet received it.
Was there any update on timing?
We expect to receive the facilities study by the end of the year. And subsequent to that, we would receive a draft generator interconnection agreement sometime in early next year.
Okay. As one of the responses to a data request, it was indicated that a renewable energy credit transfer agreement had been entered, but the third party would not allow that information to be provided to the siting board. But it said that some of the information could be provided confidentially. We would just ask that you do provide that as a post-hearing data request confidentially.
Sure, we can make that happen.
So I know you talked a little bit about the transmission line. Could you, at this point, give a general estimate? I understand that it will depend on where it is the substation is finally located, but how long the transmission line will be underground?
So there are two things I just want to make sure are clear in the 10% design. There's a line that's shown between our project solar panels and that project substation. Mm-hmm. That is not a transmission line. That's a medium voltage collection line. That will be entirely underground. That runs about 8,800 feet from our project, entirely underground, to that project substation. At that point, from the location where our project substation will be finally located, we will build a transmission line, higher voltage, 138 kilovolts, to take us above ground, potentially below ground, from our project substation to the EKPC substation. That is anticipated based on near finalization of the substation location to be around 1,000 feet long.
And you do not know if that will be overhead or underground yet?
Correct, it's not yet finalized.
Okay. So, this collection line that goes from the project kind of main area, it is gonna be going under some roads. Have there been any discussions with the county or the city, whoever owns those roads, about what permits might be necessary to go under them?
Yeah, correct. That is all within the city of Elizabethtown. So that would be with the city. We've had some preliminary discussions, but at this point, since the locations aren't quite yet finalized, we haven't been able to provide them with any specific information. We've received approval fairly recently on the entire length of that medium voltage collection line. Sorry, not the entire length, I would say about 92% of it. So at this point, we have scheduled, are near to schedule site visits with our surveyor, Sam, who will get out to site and do those surveys. That is essential before we can submit any crossing applications because we need long coordinates of those crossing locations, such that they can file any applications that we submit.
And will all of that information be submitted in the application for the transmission line?
I do not believe so.
Okay, so I would ask that as a post-hearing data request, kind of an ongoing one, that you provide those updates and any of the permits that are necessary for that collection system that goes underground, under the roads.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
And have the easements or crossing agreements for that collection system, that collection line been secured?
They have been approved. They are not yet fully signed.
And again, I would ask that once those are, you submit those as a post-hearing data request as well.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. So I have a few questions about the setbacks. There's been some conflicting motions and documents filed in this case. So what are the planned setbacks for the project?
At this point, we are planning for a minimum of 450-foot setbacks from any home to any generating equipment. We will not come any closer than that.
That's for the participating or non-participating?
Correct.
And what about the substation? Because at one point it was said that you would be placing that at 1,000 feet. Is that still correct?
We are currently, the planned location for that substation is over 1,000 feet from any participating or non-participating home. There is, because we have not yet finalized those agreements, if something were to happen in final negotiations, it's likely that we would need to move the substation to the south of the EKPC substation, in which case the substation could come as close as 750 feet from any home. So we're looking for approval on that regard.
So it would be between 750 and 1,000 feet, but no closer than the 750?
Correct.
Okay. Also, in one of the motions about the setback, it was stated that one of the plans is to request that the city of Elizabethtown annex the property. Has any of that process been started? What does that look like?
At this point, nothing has been commenced. Annexation in Elizabethtown is consensual, entirely consensual. So any annexation to occur would be initiated by our landowners. Basically, they would submit a petition for annexation, and that would be between the landowners and the city. None of that has yet happened. At this point, any information or work that's been put into that has been administrative and data collection in nature.
And so if those landowners make that petition, it's automatically granted, or there still has to be a hearing, or how does that work?
It is not automatically granted. Yeah, there's kind of a few steps that happen, and within those steps there are multiple opportunities for public engagement and involvement. The first is a recommendation needs to be made. Well, there's a petition for annexation submitted by the landowner. Then there's a period of time that passes, a notice period over 30 days. And then there's a hearing scheduled with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission would make a recommendation or not for annexation and appropriate zoning classification of that land to the City Council.
Okay.
Then the City Council has 2 readings over however many weeks, months, all of which are public and available for comment. And they eventually will vote whether or not to approve annexation in that zoning classification.
And even if it is annexed, or if it remains Hardin County Planning and Zoning, it's still planned to be the 450 feet setback from any residence and the 750 to 1,000 feet for the substation.
Correct.
Exhibit N of the application contains the decommissioning plan. Is this the final decommissioning plan, or do you expect updates?
At this point, we don't expect to update it. If it was requested of us, we could. There will be some minor changes to, amount of equipment, most likely once we have a contractor on board, but no substantial changes to that would be made.
And within that decommissioning plan, section 2.5 states that for the purposes of this plan, it is assumed that all cabling and conduit located above and below the surface will be removed. And so does that mean that you all are committing to remove all equipment below ground regardless of the depth?
Correct.
Okay. And then I do have some questions about the economic impact report. Some of them I think would be better for you because it does involve the information that was given to, I'm gonna pronounce his name, Shirazi, Dr. Shirazi.
Sure.
But if you feel like these would be better for him as well, please let me know.
Sure.
So in the response to the staff's second request for information, item 2, it was stated that based on previous development experience, it is expected that 150 to 200 jobs would be created during construction. And is that from previous experience, or is that just an estimate?
That is from previous experience for projects with similar type of conditions of around this size. That is what we would expect to be required for construction in order to meet our deadlines, basically.
Okay. Now, out of that 150 to 200 jobs, is that local jobs, or is that 200 jobs no matter where those people are hired from?
That statement of 150 to 200 jobs is the amount of jobs no matter where they are coming from. So that would be total construction related jobs. We are basically committed, Lightsource BP is committed, and through our contractors committed to hiring as many local employees as we can. So that, that's not a commitment to 150 to 200 local jobs, because I don't know if there are 150 to 200 people we could hire locally for this sort of job, but we are committed to finding as many local employees as we can.
And so that kind of leads to the exhibit B2E, which is the public information documents that were provided. And it does say in that document that a majority local workers, so 150 to 200 construction jobs for 10 to 12 months with a majority of local workers. So what does that local mean to you all? Does that mean Hardin County, the general area? How is that defined? 'Cause that was the information that was provided to the public.
Counselor, can you tell me again the document so I can put it in front of him so he can reference it?
Exhibit B2E of the application. It was the local handouts at the meetings.
Which page are you on?
B2E. It's the public flyers or handouts that were given at the meeting.
The copy that I'm looking at has 24 pages.
It's
on it.
20 of 24.
What is it?
20 of 24.
Thank you.
I think it's the page that kind of looks like a flow chart, kind of.
May I approach? Mr. Chairman, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah,
So which of the pages of 24 is the document that you're referencing?
Let me pull it up. I apologize. So on mine, the one I was looking at is actually 9 pages. It's 07 on my, when I pull it up on our website, 07 Exhibit B2E Part 3. And it is the first page of that document. Well, it does say page 20 of 24 on the top corner,
Okay.
but it's page 1 of 9 of the PDFs that were submitted.
Was it the document that says proposed Telesto solar farm above
Yes,
sunflowers?
Yes.
Jack, do you see where she's looking at?
yes.
Okay.
So it's on the right side where it says jobs, direct jobs during peak construction with the majority local labor.
Sure.
And so what does that, I guess, mean to you all? What does the majority local labor mean if you believe that they're not all going to be hired locally?
Sure. Yeah, generally that speaks to a commitment to hire as many and as local as possible. So in most cases, our contractor will hold job fairs or something that looks like a job fair locally. And that will be somewhere in Elizabethtown, Hardin County area, and looking to fill positions appropriately, as local as possible. I think the radius of where we're looking will kind of expand outward, I think, most appropriately, as they seek to continue to fill those positions. So I can't guarantee that we're gonna be able to hire 76 people from
Right.
the city of Elizabethtown at this point, but there's a commitment to do so, to attempt to.
Is there some kind of specific skill set that you anticipate will be needed that would not be able to be filled by local construction jobs?
I'm not the construction guy, so I can't speak to all the specific jobs required. Hannah Cooney can likely speak to those much more clearly than I can. But yeah, there's a wide array of different jobs that we're seeking to fill for these sorts of projects, from civil to electrical to all sorts of things.
And also on that same page, in the text portion, it says it would also provide a more than $7 million boost to government agencies in revenue over the next 35 years without a tax increase on its citizens. And could you explain where that $7 million figure was, or how it was reached, where it came from?
Sure. Yeah, so we work with third-party tax consultants who do tax modeling in advance of projects being constructed or even in advance of projects being assessed. So they take comparable sorts of things in the region and the information from the tax authorities, tax rates, millage rates, that sort of thing, to basically build a model based on our estimates of the capital costs associated with the equipment and the land that we're utilizing for the project, and then spit out a fancy model that ultimately shows a number of, here are your ad valorem taxes relating to the improvements on the property, here are your taxes related to the real property if it's reassessed from agricultural to commercial or whatever it may be. And then any other taxes levied against the project. Essentially, that $7 million figure is the approximate sum of. I don't think it's $7 million on the dot, but it's the approximate sum of property tax, real property tax, sales tax, everything that we would expect to pay.
Okay. And I don't have any other questions for Mr. Steele.
Thank you.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, do you have any questions for this witness?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I have a few. Good morning, Mr. Steele.
Morning.
I've got quite a few questions here, and if there's any that should be deferred to somebody else, just let me know. But generally, I think I read where this project was a $60 million investment. I don't know if that's the current dollar figure or not, but to what extent has supply chain and rising cost of materials impacted that original figure, or is that still a valid figure?
Sure. I think that the estimate that we've provided, I think the number, I couldn't quite hear what you were saying, but the number that we've provided, I believe, is 140 million approximately in terms of investment for the project. That we expect to be in the ballpark of the investment made. Like you referenced, there are, fluctuations in supply chain relating to materials, where they're coming from, all that sort of thing that I can't anticipate. I will say a lot of the procurement that is done for the project is done by our EPC contractor. That's the P in EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction. So they will be in charge of procuring much of the equipment. Some of the major equipment, like the solar panels themselves, the transformers, that sort of thing, those have been secured by Lightsource BP. So for the most part, those costs have been locked in. We've done a lot of work to ensure sort of stability in all the supply chain issues that the globe has been hit with. So we have a secure source of solar panels, which is the largest capital investment for the project at this point. So the majority of the capital investment is fairly secured and understood at this point, but there is likely to be some fluctuation in that number.
And do you anticipate there'll be any impact to the project timeline that you all just submitted recently? Or is that still a pretty good timeline at this point?
I think that's a fairly accurate timeline to go off of at this point.
Okay, thank you. I noticed in some of your all's material that you gave to the public, particularly your PowerPoints and so on, you promote the use of sheep for grazing around the panels. Do you all anticipate that you will actually do that you'll use livestock in that manner?
At this point, we do anticipate doing that. Nothing has been finalized, so I can't, guarantee the use of sheep. We use sheep to manage the vegetation on site. It's pretty much the only animal that works. We've tried goats; they chew everything, and cows are far too large to squeeze beneath the solar panels. So sheep are very effective and hungry, so they keep the grass down well. We've done that in Texas. We've done that in Pennsylvania. We're looking at it across the board for most of our projects. We actually had an event a couple of weeks ago where a number of different sheep grazers came out to meet our team and discuss the possibility of bringing their flocks onto the project. We haven't yet solicited any proposals for sheep management, sheep grazing at this point, but we anticipate utilizing it at least on some of the project. In a lot of cases, it's kind of a combination, best use of spot mowing and sheep grazing to keep the vegetation down. But yes, we anticipate using sheep on this project.
And that's exactly where I was going. Local farmers, I assume?
Yes, within the state of Kentucky, and we've actually been talking to folks very local to Hardin County as well.
That would be great. Thank you. Let's switch to let's switch to a topic that's often brought up about the panels themselves. I read with interest in your decommissioning plan about recycling of panels and so on and so forth. There was a mention of an EPA toxicity leachate test in one document that I looked at. Can you tell us what that is exactly, how that test is done, what the results were?
Sure. All of our panels are tier 1 solar panels. So, they pass rigorous testing requirements that are spelled out, like you said, by the EPA. Those tests, the specifics of those tests, I think I'll spare you me mumbling through trying to describe the technical specifics of those. We are happy to provide any technical specifications relating to those tests as a post-hearing filing on the record. But I will say, yes, every piece of equipment from inverters to panels to cabling, everything has passed those toxicity rating tests, and they expose the panels to the most inclement of conditions in terms of wind and hail and all that sort of thing. So even in the event that it's a catastrophic failure and a boulder falls on one of the solar panels and cracks it to a bunch of pieces, it doesn't leak any toxic material or anything like that into the soils or groundwater.
Thank you. I do believe the results of those tests will be good for the record.
Sure.
So I would appreciate those being sent in as well. As far as the decommissioning plan goes, another topic that's really paramount, in particularly where you're turning agricultural land into solar development, is how the land itself will be returned back to pre-construction condition. I know that's mentioned in the decommissioning plan, but just for the record, can you specifically describe how that is done and how that will be accomplished?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the first and most primary level of certainty relating to that point is in each and every one of our leases, there's specific language that states exactly what you said. Upon decommissioning, something like upon decommissioning of the solar facility, the land will be returned to its current state as best as is possible or practicable. And yeah, the way that's done is, when we're assessing sites at this point, we look for as flat, as sort of agricultural in production as possible sort of land, so that we're not going in and impacting that land to the greatest extent possible. We avoid cutting trees. We set back from all protected wetlands and water bodies. We do extensive threatened and endangered species analysis, nest surveys, that sort of thing, so as to ensure that we're not impacting any sort of native or protective flora or fauna. So that is all best management practices that we employ on the front end. And then when the project comes off, we're decommissioning all the materials and then returning the ground essentially to as close of its state as when we found it as possible. A part of our construction management plans is a environmental and biodiversity plan. We've already selected a seed mix for this project, but basically those seed mixes, as I sort of alluded to previously, are selected to be only native seed mixes, some sort of mix of grasses and flowers and pollinators and that sort of thing, that are proven to enhance soil stability and soil health and diverse carbon matter in the soils themselves. We actually do soil testing in advance of construction so that we have a benchmark of what the soil health is prior to when we come onto the project, so that we can show that we have not damaged the health of the soil at all either.
Just a little bit of clarification. I did notice that it appeared that whatever topsoil may be graded from the site it was proposed that it would be kept in berms and then returned, I guess, in some fashion to original grade. How much grading is actually done in one of these projects where removal of the topsoil, the fertile soil that is highly prized for its agricultural production, how much of that is actually done in one of these projects?
Sure. I would say it's highly variable depending on the type of site or the type of company that's building the project. We seek to site projects on, like I said, as flat of land as possible on previously disturbed land, and by previously disturbed I mostly just mean in agricultural production or pasture or something of the like. So we seek to have to, for environmental reasons and also just for our bottom line, avoid as much grading as possible, because that's a cost adder to the project. I can't speak to the specifics at this point of how much exactly grading we're going to be doing on this project. I think Hannah can probably speak in more depth than I can to that point. We have some preliminary civil grading plans that we've created. Those are not yet finalized or pushed to sort of final state, I guess. So we don't have 100% clarity on that, but it will be fairly minimal and as minimal as possible.
Okay, thank you. Let's switch over to karst issues. I read the Terracon geotech report. Not surprisingly, it indicated this is a high karst risk area. However, I just want to get a little bit of clarification. In response to data request number 27, Telesto's response to that data request referenced the geotech report, acknowledged the high karst area, but I thought kind of made a leap to saying that there was no karst features in this property, which I find remarkable. As a matter of fact, on Exhibit A in the application on slide 4, I think in one of the boundaries, in one of the plats of the property boundary, there's a sinkhole, at least in my estimation, but again, I'm not boots on the ground. I'm looking at a aerial photo. But I did want to get some clarification if Telesto stood by that there's no apparent karst features within the property boundary. It seems highly unlikely to me, but I just wanted to get some clarification there.
Deputy Secretary, pardon me, can you say again what it is that you're looking at, just so I can have Jack reference it?
The Exhibit A of your application, which was the maps and design, it was slide 4, which was just kind of an arrow with the project boundaries. And I'll tell you the exact number as soon as I bring it up again here. Oh. Are you there, Mr. Dutton?
That's the property.
Mr. Lyons, can you again repeat what it is that you're looking at? I'm in Exhibit A. I'm just not sure which map you're looking at.
Slide 4. There's,
It's the one with the APN numbers.
Okay.
in particular, that 167-00-00-008. That looks like a sinkhole right in the middle of that piece of property. And I noticed that you all avoided that with the solar array layout.
Sure. Yeah, one point of clarification is for that property that you are referencing and a couple of other properties that you're referencing, we're not actually utilizing all of it. So in that case, we're actually using probably less than half of that parcel. If you reference the 10% design set, like you said, we set back from a lot of it. As it relates to the specific karst features, I'll probably punt that to Chad, as he's our environmental consultant and is more familiarized with the specifics of the karst features or lack thereof on site.
And it could be that Telesto's perhaps misinterpreting Terracon's report. It didn't specifically speak to the existence of karst features or not. And it kind of looks like Telesto may have, in their response to data request 27, kind of made that leap. I'm just trying to clarify that. Quite honestly, the response and how you would deal with karst features should you come across them was satisfactory. With a 50-foot setback, I have no problem with when that, if that was to occur, that's what would be done. But I just thought saying that there were no karst features on this property seemed highly unlikely. And then I looked at the map and it looks like there's one there. So just a point of clarification. I don't know what to do about that or what the siting board may want to do in terms of clarification or not, but just pointing that out for the record.
Sure, appreciate that. And yeah, we'll definitely make sure to take every effort to ensure we're not creating any risk by building ever any karst features. And Chad can speak to that in more depth.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple other questions for Mr. Steele. You mentioned threatened endangered species and jurisdictional waters assessments. Have those been completed?
They have been completed, yes. The one thing, and Chad completed those reports and finalized those reports, so I can speak to specific questions relating to them if you have any, but the one point of clarification I'll make is in advance of construction, in all cases, we do nest surveys to ensure there are no, protected nesting birds out on site that we could potentially impact with our construction activities. So that is one activity that's sort of time dependent based on nesting season and construction schedules that we will carry out.
Obviously, it's bat roosting habitat is probably the main feature of the T&E consultation with Fish and Wildlife. One last thing, Mr. Steele, you mentioned native seed, or you mentioned seed mixes. Mm-hmm. I would encourage Telesto to do an actual Kentucky biological assessment tool that our nature preserves database includes. That could lead you to change your seed mix. This area could be historically prairie species, and we would prefer that if you put back native species that you would lean towards any historically native species, particularly prairie species that could have been in this area, and running the biological assessment tool that can be found on the cabinet's website under nature preserves would essentially be the consultation with our staff to let you know if that is the case. So,
Sure. Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if our team that handles biodiversity and seed mix selection took that into account while they're sort of consulting on making the selection. We have consulted with professors from universities within the state of Kentucky to help make that decision on our seed mix. But yeah, we'll definitely continue to take all of those things into account.
and I guess, Mr. Chairman, we would obviously ask for those jurisdictional waters assessment and threatened endangered species assessment as data requests.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Montgomery, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Steele. I just have a few questions. The first one is more of a clarification question. And going through the application, there are multiple advertisements, I guess, informing the public. The first is a notice of application to adjacent landowners where it states that this project is 675 acres and a 110 megawatt project. There's also it looks like a letter for an open house that says that this is a 600 acre project with 110 megawatt capacity. And then, let's see, I'm gonna make sure I get this right. It looks like in the News Enterprise, there was a advertisement stating that this was a 650 acre project with 110 megawatt capacity. And so I guess my question is has the amount of acreage been defined at this point? And then secondly, I'm not sure where I got this. I'll apologize in advance. I've also seen that this could be up to 126.5 megawatts worth of production. Could you just clarify where we are today as far as the acreage and production capacity is concerned?
Yes, absolutely. I'll take the second one first. So there are two primary numbers that we reference when we're talking about these production facilities. The first and most primarily used number is that 110 megawatts. That is 110 megawatts AC, or alternating current. So that's the amount of electricity that is basically put onto the electric grid at an alternating current. The electricity is collected at the direct current, so it's that 126, 127 number that you referenced is the DC, or direct current, reference in terms of project size. The alternating current, that's the amount that we applied to PJM and EKPC for. That number has never changed. The direct current number has to do with ratios of how you size your production and inverters and that sort of thing, and it does fluctuate depending on how many panels you put out there, and so that can change a little bit. At this point, it's right around 126, 127.
Perfect. And my second question, and I apologize, there was a second where I lost internet, I had to reconnect. So Ms. Temple might have already asked this question, but in terms of engagement with the public, have you sat down with local emergency management to discuss any remediation measures as occurrences such as fire or those sort of occurrences might occur?
We've not yet sat down with any of the fire districts specifically, or emergency management districts specifically. but fully intend to and to share plans with them such as they're informed to the greatest extent they can be. And then, Mr. Montgomery, I think I missed answering one of your other questions, which had to do with the acreage and sizing and published acreage as it related to our public notices. There was some fluctuation in those numbers. That had to do with, what we anticipated being our setback requirements and setback plans. So there was some slight variation from somewhere around 600 all the way up to around 650. At this point, it is defined the acreage that we are seeking approval for. And I think that exists in the record. I think it's 35 acres, something like that. It's in the public record at this point.
Perfect. And then the next question I have is in regards to the total tax revenue of nearly $7 million. I assume that a pilot agreement has not been entered. Is that correct?
Correct. No pilot or IRB program has been entered into or are anticipated to be entered into.
Very good. And do you by chance know, so I know you said that there was a third-party tax advisor involved. Do you by chance know if they factored into their analysis the city-level taxes? Obviously, I believe the property is outside of any taxable city district, but I know as far as prior discussions that we're looking, or you all are looking at annexation. So just wanted to make sure that that was not a part of the analysis.
Correct. The numbers that we have published, that 7 million approximate figure, does not include any additional city taxes levied against the project. So doesn't include that occupational tax or that net profit tax, which would be in addition to what we've already shown.
Very good. That's all the questions I have. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Thank you.
Mr. Regan, do you have any questions?
I do. I'd like to, and I'm not sure you're the right person to talk about the jobs, and how many of them will be local.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, have there been any discussions with any of the high schools about putting in a program there to maybe train some people coming out of high school that might be interested in that?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you raise. We've had some discussions with the public school districts, sort of about the concept of learning about renewable energy and solar and the jobs associated with those in the classroom. So that, it's on the table, nothing that we've directed or anything like that. We've also had discussions with ECTC, the community college, about similar topics and programs. And we've met on a number of occasions with FFA representation to talk about potential exciting projects and educational opportunities for them, and that sort of thing. And there are dollars set aside from BP to invest in those sorts of opportunities, educational and philanthropic opportunities in the community. Whether it's related to jobs or renewable academics or anything of the like.
And you said of the 150 to 200, those jobs will be 10 to 12 months?
That's correct. Yeah, that's what we anticipate the construction timeline to be.
Okay, thanks. That's all I
Thank you.
have.
What is the voltage of the collection system that runs to the substation?
34.5 kilovolts.
Okay, and then, so the underground collection system will go to the substation, then the substation will obviously step up to 138, and then you'll run a 138 line from that substation to the EKPC point of interconnect, is that correct?
That's correct. And
you expect, under the 10% map, I'm just gonna, eyeball and say that the substation was 75 feet from the point of interconnect. Is that about right?
If you drew a line from where we're showing that substation to the KPC substation, it's probably more like 400, 500 feet.
The one that's directly across the road?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just
So-
because that substation's set back from the road quite a ways.
Okay. So it's now going to be 1,000 feet, is that correct?
About 1,000 feet. And that has to do with our discussions with EKPC and sort of where they will allow us to take an easement on their property. It's not exactly the most direct line.
Okay. So a couple of items, I guess, on this. So it is outside of the footprint of the 10% map that you were discussing this morning, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Have you finalized the position of the substation?
We have not yet finalized that location. We're in final discussions, but nothing has yet been signed.
Okay. Have you finalized the plot of land that it'll be located on?
No.
But you are requesting that as part of your certificate in this case?
We intend to file a separate transmission application, construction application.
Well, what I want to be clear of is the substation part of this application, or will the substation be part of the transmission line application?
I see. The substation location would be a part of this application.
But we don't know where it's going to go yet.
Not quite.
Mr. Martin responded in the first round of the data request, and I'll ask you first instead of asking him and then having to come back to you. And in response to data request 1-15, was asking about the airport glare study, and it was specifically noted in that response that a permit would have to be received from the Kentucky Airport Zoning Commission. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And has that been received?
We, at that time of filing, had anticipated that it would need to be received. We have contacted them and specifically asked them, provided details about our project location and its proximity to that regional airport, and they have, in writing, told us that we don't need a permit.
And have you all filed that as a supplemental filing in this case to 1-15?
I don't believe we have.
Okay, so can we get that as a post-hearing data request? But otherwise, it's your understanding that all of the other permits, certificates from the FAA and everybody else that you would need for the airport have all been approved, or otherwise you've been told that they're not necessary?
Correct. And we have been in close contact with the airport and the airport board about our project and have provided to them plans and everything.
Okay. Are you aware of the requirements under 278-706-2K, which discuss violations of federal or state environmental laws, rules, or administrative regulations?
Not the specific reference, but potentially the general requirements.
Okay. So as part of the application, and I don't know that there was a I don't know that there was an affidavit that came with it, but as part of the application, it was indicated, I guess by council, that, let me find it again. It was indicated by council in paragraph 21 of the application, and I'll just read it here while Mr. Dutton's frantically working to get a copy of it. Pursuant to 278, KRS 278-706-2K, Telesto states that there have been no violations of federal or state environmental laws, rules, or administrative regulations where the violations resulted in criminal convictions or civil or administrative fines exceeding $5,000 by Telesto or its parent, its owner parent BP Solar, or BP Solar's parent BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc. There are also no pending actions, judicial or administrative, alleging or relating to such violations against Telesto, BP Solar, or BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc. Are you aware of this response?
Yes.
Okay. Are you the person that would have been the one that looked that up? I mean, are you, it doesn't indicate who the person that confirms that, but is that your understanding? Can you, from the stand, confirm that that's your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding, and I can make that claim because we ran it all the way up the flagpole to BP, and their legal team and advisors confirmed that all for us. So that didn't come from me, came from BP directly.
Okay, but you have individual knowledge of those conversations?
Yes.
So does Telesto have any employees?
No.
Does BP Solar have employees?
I'm honestly not exactly sure the structure of everything or where employment lies, but I don't believe so.
So can we ask that as a post hearing data request? Does BP Solar have them? Do you know if BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc. has employees?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. And do you know who owns BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc.?
I don't.
All right. And the reason I'm just curious, so the statute says what the statute says, but it talks about ownership interest.
Sure.
Any person having an ownership interest. So you provided the person seeking the application Telesto, and then does BP Solar own all of Telesto, or is it the only member of Telesto? But is it the only entity with an ownership interest in Telesto?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Okay. And then do you know if BP Solar is owned by anyone else in addition to BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc.?
I don't know.
And I'm asking it, I'll tell you why I'm asking it, we're gonna ask it at post hearing data request.
Sure.
But I'm curious why BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc., it's not the direct parent, because it's at least 2 layers up, but it was provided, but then it stopped there. So why it was provided, but I assume BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc. is not the ultimate. I assume somebody has an ownership interest in the way things go, has an ownership interest in BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc. So I'm just gonna ask, as a post hearing data request, why it went to that third company, why it stopped at that third company, and then to have an appreciation for whether either of those intervening companies have employees.
Sure.
And then who has an ownership interest and up from BP North America, BP Alternative Energy North America, Inc. And then I'm also gonna ask, as one of these post hearing data requests, who is going to have the employees? What entity has an ownership interest in Telesto that is actually going to have employees or management that are going to carry out whatever whatever commitments, for instance, that you all have committed to? Who's actually going to be the people or persons responsible for carrying that out?
Sure.
So we'll ask that as a post hearing data request.
Yeah, BP will be the ultimate owner operator of the project, but we can clarify kind of which entity is specific to its ownership.
Okay, thank you. It's 120 something. This project is 120. I think you said 7 megawatts DC, 110 megawatts AC. This is going to be deliverable to PJM. Do you know if you all, as part of the interconnection process, do you know how many capacity interconnection rights you all are seeking?
Specific to capacity, I'm not entirely sure. Or the difference, usually it's like network resource versus energy resource, that sort of thing.
Right. Do you know whether whether you all are seeking capacity interconnection rights so you can participate as a capacity performance entity, or whether you all just anticipate performing as an energy resource?
I believe we are, and I know that's publicly available, and we can provide that as a post hearing data request.
Right,
Just
so
to make sure because I don't know the exact percentage of network resource, or that's
fine. So we'll just ask what your all's deliverability anticipations are, just so that we have a better idea of what impact you actually have on the grid, or whether or not if you're participating as a network resource or energy only.
Sure.
When did you all enter the queue? I mean, how long, I mean, you don't have any of your, you don't even have your facility study back, right? Which is the second, I believe, of the 3 studies. You don't have an interconnection agreement yet. When did you all start the process on the wholesale, the RTO interconnection process?
Filed our PJM application.
Yeah.
We can get you the specific date.
You don't have to tell me the exact date, but is it like this year? Is it last year? Is
Oh.
it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I believe it was in 2020 at some point.
Right. So it's not like you all filed this and then halfway through the case decided to finally file with PJM.
No, no.
You wouldn't be studied until 2030.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they're busy.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Mr. Dutton, do you have any redirect?
Can I have just a moment?
Sure. And actually, if you want to, just to give yourself an opportunity, we'll go ahead and take our break right now and give you a chance to go over your notes, talk to your witness and see if there's any additional questions you need to ask on redirect. So
That sounds great, thank you.
we'll take a short recess for 10 minutes until 10:45. All right, we're back on the record in case number 2022-00096. Mr. Dutton, do you have any redirect of this witness?
I do. Just one quick question. Mr. Steele, what is your understanding of the series of events or the basis for the fact that this project is not required to get a permit from the airport, the Kentucky Airport Zoning Commission?
Sure. Yeah, I think we had anticipated needing that permit because those were that was our understanding of the process and requirements under the jurisdiction of a previous administration. That administration has since changed over and has a different interpretation and read on the jurisdiction and requirements therein.
Thank you for that. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Steele.
Thank you.
Sit down. Mr. Dutton, you have additional witnesses?
We certainly do, Your Honor. For our next witness, I'd like to call on Ms. Hannah Cooney.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Hannah Cooney. The address is 11110 Terrace Bluff Drive, Austin, Texas, 78754.
Mr. Dutton, you may ask.
Thank you. Ms. Cooney, who do you work for?
Light Source BP,
And what is your title there?
Assistant Project Manager.
And what was your role with this project?
So I'm the Assistant Project Manager on the Telesto project on the construction side. We're not in construction, but I've been helping prepare for this application and get the EPC contract executed. We're early in those phases, and I help also with design.
And you're familiar with the documents and other pleadings that have been filed in this case, is that correct?
Yes.
Is there anything in the record that you would like to modify, clarify, or update?
No.
With that, I'll turn to the witness.
Excuse me. I believe this was the first set that was kind of handed over to you, and could you please provide an update on when you believe construction will start?
Yes, so we are currently planning to have construction start in early March, but that would be dependent on getting the correct permitting for the project, securing an EPC contractor, things of this nature.
And that process, or once construction starts, it's indicated as about 10 to 12 months.
Correct.
And so I guess the operational date would be summer of 2024?
Yep, that's correct.
And about how long do you anticipate that the pile driving would occur during the construction?
Pile driving would typically take, on a construction project this size, 3 to 4 months, if there are not significant delays.
And we did ask this in one of the data requests about the communication between the other solar developments in that general area. Have you all had any more communication with those other companies about timing of construction or anything like that?
I don't know, I'm not aware.
And the noise questions are for Mr. Martin, correct? Okay.
Right.
I believe that is all I have for you. Thank you.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, do you have any questions for this witness?
Just the one follow-up that I think Mr. Steele deferred to Ms. Cooney on was the grading aspect of the project and what impact it has on topsoil and how that would be returned. I think he deferred to her. I may be not remembering that correctly.
Yep, that's correct. So in our current 10% design plan for civil, we are showing a little over 60,000 cubic yards of cut and fill, with the cut being slightly more than the fill. So that would indicate that we'll be using And we try to do this on every project to keep as much of the soil within the project boundaries as we can. So whatever we cut, we would use to fill somewhere else. So I think with the current design plan, we're showing about 2,000 or 3,000 cubic yards of additional cut. So this would have to be brought off site, potentially somewhere.
So for us non-construction engineer folks, does that mean you're just really, you're having to do some grading, but trying to limit that to, to keep as much soil on the project as possible?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's good for our contractors in terms of not having to truck in extra soil or having to deal with extra soil that they cut, that they take away in the grading process to keep everything on site as much as possible and minimize that additional input or additional output.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montgomery, any questions?
I don't have any questions for this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Regan?
I don't, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dutton, do you have any redirect for Ms. Cooney?
I do not. Can I have just a moment to make sure that we did revisit the questions that were asked of her? Oh, yes, if I may.
Please.
Ms. Cooney, there was a question about the status of the SWIP, the Stormwater Protection Plan. Do you know roughly when that'll be put together?
It's tough to say exactly when, but that's something that will be formed by the EPC contractor. So we have a preliminary erosion and sediment control plan, which would be developed into the SWIP plan. But at this time, that the EPC contractor is not secured, so I can't say with certainty when that would be.
Okay, and are you familiar with sort of how hiring works on these types of construction projects, or preferably this project more specifically?
Yeah.
So what are some of the difficulties that you face in hiring 150 to 200 essentially local construction workers?
Yeah, it will come down to what other jobs are currently in the area in terms of other construction projects. So if there's a lot of other activity that would, eat away from the potential job pool or job amount of resources that we would have to hire from. Typically, we would be looking for day laborers, people who maybe don't have degrees and can jump into a job pretty quickly. And it really depends on what activity is in the area and who is willing to work.
Do you anticipate that the Blue Oval construction project will put a pinch on your labor pool?
Yeah, likely.
And what sort of, Mr. Steele referenced a few items that the project is doing to try and grow the labor pool there in the local community. Do you have anything to add to that, or anything that you want to explain more thoroughly?
No, only that I think EPC contractors, they try to hire locally. It's good for them to hire locally. Typically, employees can be happier because they live locally. They're not away from their families. So it's not only a benefit to the community that we hire locally, but also it's the project itself wants local people.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cooney. You may stand down.
Great, thank you.
Step down. Mr. Dutton, you can call your next witness.
Yes, my next witness is Dr. Shirazi, who is appearing virtually.
Dr. Shirazi, if you could turn on your camera and your microphone. Can you indicate that you can hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Great. Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay. Please state your name and business address.
Yosef Shirazi, 702 East 54th Street, Savannah, Georgia, 31405.
Okay. Mr. Dutton, you may ask.
Thank you. Mr. Shirazi, who do you work for?
I work for Cardno, now Stantec,
And what is your title?
senior economist.
And what was your role in preparing the materials in this matter?
So I was lead on developing the socioeconomic analysis. I believe it's referred to as Exhibit M, as in mother.
Is there anything in the record that you would like to clarify, modify, or update at this time?
There is not.
And with that, I'll turn to the witness.
Ms. Temple?
And could you refer to the response to staff's second request for information, item 2? Do you have?
Yes, I'm sorry. Did I miss a question?
No, I was just making sure you had that pulled up.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It begins with refer to application Exhibit B2E, page
Yes.
2.
Yes. So in that, could you explain how the economic impact would differ if you used 200 local jobs?
So in the JEDI model, which is the economic impact analysis model that is used here in this report, jobs is actually an output of the model and not an input. So, which is to say, I wouldn't be able to drive the model starting from jobs necessarily without making a variety of assumptions.
And part of that response, and then part of the report that you created, the Exhibit M, it says that the impacts reported for Hardin County are equal to the Kentucky estimates multiplied by 0.0249. And is this the scaling approach that you used in that response to 2A?
So unfortunately, the version I pulled up are the questions themselves. Okay, here are the answers. Let me look over. You're wondering if the answer to 2A is based upon the same 0.249 scaling factor, 0.0249, excuse me?
Yes.
I apologize while I'm just reading over the response. So the response I'm seeing, no, is more general, and it doesn't. It's not based off of the 0.0249 scaling factor itself.
And so, does the JEDI modeling only calculate a statewide impact, but not a county level impact?
So, yes, the JEDI model is designed and set up to run specifically at the state level or the national level. It can be manipulated with certain additional data and labor on the part of the analyst to be coaxed to run at the county level. But so yes, but not natively, if that makes sense.
And so you could do it for just Hardin County?
It is possible.
And could you provide that as a post-hearing data request?
So I don't want to commit to anything without perhaps attorney input here. And one reason I hesitate is one of the caveats to run it, to coax it into doing a county level run, is the purchase of relevant economic data that is not, it costs on the order of single thousands of dollars per county. and it is purchased from a North Carolina outfit called Implan Group.
I think. And then that $7 million we've been talking about as the tax estimate, does the Jedi model also calculate property taxes?
The Jedi model can deal with taxes of certain sorts. It's a bit clunky. So it's typically preferred to analyze and assess taxes outside of Jedi. And that is what was done in the case of Telesto. There was a third-party consultant that specializes in tax analysis who performed the tax analysis that estimated that roughly $7 million figure.
Okay.
So that was not an output of the Jedi model.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, you could have run this model for the Hardin County level data, but you just did not have that data available to you because you would have to pay for it?
So it is true that to run the model, you would have to purchase data, which I do not have on hand. But that is not the only reason. There are a variety of factors that went into the decision to estimate county level impacts, other than just we need to purchase data that I don't have.
Okay, and what were those factors?
So perhaps the biggest of that is we need additional estimates from BP Lightsource, specifically relating to estimating the percent of labor and the percent of materials that come from within county. The model is very sensitive to those inputs, and those inputs are quite, at least in my experience, quite uncertain.
And so other than you needed more information from them, was there any other reasons why you just made estimates for the county level?
So the approach that we took with this scaling factor of 0.0249 is highly unlikely to overstate the impacts, the economic impacts in particular. And because it provides a conservative estimate, meaning tending to understate impacts, it seemed like a prudent approach. To avoid overstating impacts at the county level.
I don't have any other questions for Dr. Shiraki.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, do you have any questions for this witness?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Montgomery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have a few questions for the witness. Good morning. I noticed that you brought up that to get the county level data, you would have to purchase data from Implan. Could you elaborate on the difference between the Jedi model and the Implan model?
Sure. So at their core, the mechanics are actually the same. Implan, on one hand, is a very general purpose model that can be used for any economic activity that you could imagine. Whereas the solar version of Jedi is specifically tailored by experts at the National Renewable Energy Lab for solar in particular. So they basically took the Implan model and the underlying, what are called the multipliers that are under the hood of the model, and they adapted it specifically for solar, making a lot of the difficult decisions as far as which proportional allocation of industry spend for a large PV solar project. So that's perhaps the biggest difference, is the JEDI model is a streamlined, curated version of InPlan. And secondly, the user interface is quite a bit different. So it's just Excel-based rather than web-based. The JEDI is Excel-based, whereas InPlan is now web-based.
Gotcha. And then the reason I ask is a lot of economic impact reports that we've received have used InPlan, and specifically they cite a model that is for construction of new power and communication structure, which would seem maybe not as directly or could be wider and encompassing wider range of projects, but still within the solar array of projects. Do you have any experience with InPlan?
I do, yes.
Okay. And then the second thing I want to touch on is with the methodology, it looks like to get the county level data, you are dividing Hardin County's GDP by the state's GDP. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I think would it be fair to say that, for instance, the city of Louisville, our largest MSA in the state, they might be responsible or be attributed to, say, 15-20% of the state's GDP. However, I doubt they have any large-scale solar projects. How do you take that into account when measuring GDP?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure I fully understand. Is it possible for you to maybe restate that?
Sure. So we're using GDP to measure the potential economic impact to Hardin County, and by measuring total GDP, which encompasses a wide variety of industries. I guess what I'm saying is that within the construction, or the more specifically the solar construction, obviously I don't think that well, let me rephrase. I guess I'm asking, is it with knowing that a lot of solar projects come in clusters? For instance, they go into rural areas that have flat land, that have availability on transmission lines. Are we able to, I guess I'm asking, is it reasonable to assume that dividing the county's total GDP by the state's total GDP will give us reliable data on construction and operation of a solar project?
I see. Okay. So I will try to answer that to the best of my ability, but feel free to interrupt or redirect as you see fit. But first, we'll start with the state level results. And I feel like regardless of your approach for county level, the state level, because it's a larger, more aggregated economy, it's always going to be, I won't say always, but the default assumption would be the state level results are going to be more accurate. Right? They have a bigger economy. There's more to draw from. There's less small scale spatial heterogeneity that you have to account for. So going from state level to county level is always a bit difficult and prone to a variety of inaccuracies. Obviously not intentional, but it's a difficult exercise given a variety of unknowns, and none of us have a magic crystal ball. So we try to do the methodology that is employed in this report assumes that of everything that will be all the impacts in the state, both labor and materials, will be drawn equally from every county in the Commonwealth of Kentucky relative to the size of its industry. So that's the basic underlying assumption with that scaling factor. Now, is it highly reliable? I would say it is a reliable methodology, given that I would be sensitive to overstating impacts, right? So we know, because of cost of transport and commute time, that preferentially things will actually be drawn more locally rather than from more distant parts of the Commonwealth, just based on pure economics. So to the extent they're available locally, labor and materials, they should be drawn locally. So there is embedded is the conservatism of not stating impacts, not overstating impacts. But the assumption that's made is that it's just a level playing field all across the state. Does that help?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I appreciate that. I kind of want to pivot to table 2 of your report, which is the estimated economic impact to Kentucky. And I'm looking here at the number of jobs. It says direct 335, indirect 169, and for a total of 506 jobs. Or 505 jobs, excuse me. Could you clarify as to how we could have a total of 505 jobs, whereas Mr. Steele testified that there would be 150 to 200 jobs?
Yes. So there are a few different explanations. Perhaps the easiest factor is that this includes not just construction jobs, but this includes that 505.6 also includes jobs that are associated with the supply chain, right? So if there are earth moving equipment that are needed for this project, it would include, to the extent they're needed, the amortized life of constructing a earth moving equipment and the repairs and the consumable parts, for example, as well as the electrical componentry and the frames and the panels, to the extent those are found in state or procured from within state. So it not only includes supply chain jobs, but it also includes jobs that are related to the additional earnings associated with people that are working directly on site. So those folks will be hired on site, and they will have disposable income that they'll be spending at local restaurants, clothing, just all the retail that's available in that area. There will be additional spending from the wages earned as a result of working on this project.
So if I'm hearing you right, the direct jobs would be those folks that are on site, mostly construction, but the indirect would encompass your, the whole supply chain. Is that fair?
That's correct. So it's specifically the indirect is the supply chain. So it's the folks making the equipment, and the induced are the jobs created and sustained through additional income spending at local hotels or restaurants or clothing stores, things like that.
Perfect. And could you elaborate on how you get the value of earnings in that table?
So the value of earnings is also an output of the model, but to a first approximation, what happens is I ask the developer for a variety of inputs, and one of those inputs is labor spend, an approximation or an estimate of labor spend during construction. Combining the total labor spend during construction with the percent of labor that is anticipated to come from within state, multiplying those two together approximates that first value of earnings in the direct line the 35.6 million or so.
Got it. So is it fair to say that of the 336 direct jobs, if you divide that by the value of earnings, you're roughly getting an average wage of 100 grand? Is that fair to say?
So that arithmetic checks out. Yes, that's approximately the case. But I would highlight simply just that the earnings might be 100,000, but that includes a large aspect of benefits, right? So this isn't their take home necessarily on their paycheck, but this includes a variety of ancillary benefits, including health insurance and things along those lines.
Did Telesto Solar, did they provide you with any standard occupation codes to view at the state level?
No, I don't. Occupation codes?
Correct.
No.
Okay, and then so at the estimated, or I want to now go to table 3, the estimated economic impacts, Hardin County, Kentucky. It says that there is estimated to be 8.4 direct jobs. Is that how did you estimate the 8.4 direct jobs?
So that is a direct arithmetic result of table 2. If you take table 2, each of those cells corresponds to a cell in table 3. They should line up perfectly, with the difference being that the values in table 3 are multiplied by that 2.49% scaling factor.
Okay. Would it be fair to say then that, I guess, let me just get where I'm going, and that is that, we've heard testimony today that it's the company's intention to hire majority locally. And so, whatever that means, that means. But when you look and it says 8.4 jobs out of 336 jobs are going to, be directly from Hardin County, it's just hard to believe that that's the case. And especially when we're looking, when the company is testifying that there's 150 to 200 direct jobs during construction. And so what I'm trying to do is understand what kind of economic impact is actually coming to the community. And so that's why I'm curious about this 8.4 number, because again, as you stated in your report, Hardin County is the 6th most populous county in the state of Kentucky. It would just seem that that number would be a lot higher.
Mr. Montgomery, could you restate the question, if you don't mind?
Sure. I guess that really wasn't a question. That was just more of a comment. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Regan?
Thank you, Chairman. To go back to these jobs and the modeling, when you looked at this, of the 150 to 200 jobs, are these ongoing jobs that they will be sustainable, or are these jobs, they go in for construction, I understand, but even further, they'll be there for a period of time, but you don't need a workforce of 200 to maintain those solar farms on an ongoing basis, correct? Was that
correct.
entered into the model? That these aren't
It is
full-time?
indeed.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm sorry. I felt like I interrupted you. If you look at both table 2 and 3, they're divided into a left side perhaps and a right side. One is construction phase, which is approximately 1 year. I believe it's 10 to 12 months estimated construction time. And then on the right half of those tables is the operational phase. And that left and right distinction gets at the large economic impact during construction on one hand, and which lasts for approximately 1 year. And then on the right hand, the operational phase, those impacts are ongoing every year for the life of the project.
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of questions, Dr. Shirazi. Is it, I believe you said that the inputs that were used in the model were rather conservative. Is that accurate?
Yes, so that is the case.
Were these inputs in the model more conservative than you would see for other typical solar projects?
I believe they are.
Okay, so these are particularly conservative inputs in this particular model, is that correct?
That's an accurate statement, yes.
And that, in turn, results in particularly conservative sort of job estimates coming out of the model, is that correct?
Indeed. The model is linear in function, so conservative estimates on the front end will lead to conservative estimates output.
Okay, so if we were to use some of the testimony that Mr. Steele provided today, such as the fact that they're anticipating 150 to 200 jobs, that's based on his experience, sort of not what the model spit out. If you were to try and use some of the more real-world information that we have discussed today, would you anticipate that the model would spit out results that indicate something closer to the 150 to 200 jobs that has been testified about in this case? If my question didn't make sense, that's fair, just tell me.
So the place I'm getting hung up on here is that the estimate of jobs is rather sensitive to the scale, the area of interest. So I think the 150 to 200 jobs does make sense at perhaps, yes, at certain scales. If you look at a region, perhaps within commuting distance, however we define that, but reasonably so, then yes, those job figures that you just mentioned do seem reasonable.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shirazi. I appreciate you being here, albeit virtually. You may be excused.
Thank you.
You have one more witness?
That's correct, Your Honor. Mr. Chad Martin.
Mr. Martin, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Chad Martin, 1455 Meadowbridge Drive, Greenwood, Arkansas, 72936.
Mr. Dutton.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, who do you work for?
Cardno, now Stantec.
And what is your role there?
I'm a senior principal technical director.
Okay, and what was your role in the preparation of the materials in this case?
So our company prepared most of the environmental, natural resource documents, reports, and studies, and helped prepare the application here before us today.
Okay. Is there anything in the record that you would like to clarify, modify, or update at this time?
No.
Okay. I know that you had said that there may be some information in these that you wanted. Would it be all right if I approach the witness and give them the
Okay.
mic?
Are you gonna effectively do some direct on the items that have been already asked and deferred to Mr. Martin? Or are you just gonna wait?
revisit a couple of them. If it's your preference to let staff do it, I can do that.
I think it'd be easier for you just to go ahead and do it instead of waiting to get back around.
Okay. So there was testimony from Mr. Steele about the Archaeology or Heritage Council coordination and communication. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So we completed informal consultation with the Kentucky SHPO in the form of data acquisition, and then utilizing that information to draw conclusions about the project footprint and impacts of such.
And there were questions previously about the karst geology and specifically, I think it was discovery request, I think it was 1-27. Can you speak a little bit as to whether or not there is karst on this site and the efforts that you have taken on behalf of the project to identify whether or not there's karst on the site?
Sure. I think Mr. Lyons, this also speaks to your question. We did complete formal wetland delineation on the site of streams and wetlands. During that process, we probably looked at 80% of the land visually inspected. We also completed the Phase 1 ESA, which also includes visual inspection. So during these inspections, we look for surface karst, the potential for karst to be there, looking at surface release or openings to the surface. We did not identify any of those during our studies. I believe the circular potential sinkhole that you brought forth, we mapped as a forested wetland with saturated soil and very little standing water. I've also reviewed the Terracon report and noted that limestone geology bedrock is on average around 30 feet. Most of the pilings in this case, I believe, will be in the 6, maximum 8-foot range. So giving those, that data, we did not find any, nor did we think there's going to be major potential for karst. With that said, we have included setbacks to streams, wetlands, for that reason. And I think, unless you have a follow-up question, I think that might answer your question to the potential sinkhole.
And I'm happy to attend to the witness at this time for further questions on that subject.
We'll start with Ms. Temple, and then if Mr. Lyons would like to follow up, we can do that. Ms. Temple, do you have any questions for this witness?
Please. So when you just referenced the discussion about the Office of State Archaeology and the Heritage Council, you said you had informal conversations with data acquisitions. What does that involve?
Right, so we request data on any archaeological or cultural, historical features that have been mapped or reported since they've been reporting and documenting. We'll take that information and plot it, map it, and then advise our client of any potential impacts.
And so were any found on this site?
No cultural resources were found on site. Some potentially historical buildings were identified, and appropriate setbacks were given to those during design.
And is that kind of like the 50-foot setback for karst? Is it the same for the cultural?
It's similar, but in this particular situation, this would be more of a 300 to 400 foot setback for these particular buildings.
Do you know about how many there are?
Historical features, we could, no, it's not in this binder. I'm going to 3. I'm going to go on record
Okay.
saying 3.
And then, do you have the list or know what the native species were for the vegetative buffers? I believe that was deferred to you.
For the landscape plan?
Yes, sorry.
Are theirs labeled the same, Mr. Dutton? Are their binders labeled the same?
Their binders are not labeled the same, but in the,
Okay,
on the front
so
of each document, there should be a title.
Okay. Binder 1, tab 11, Exhibit F, landscaping plan.
So that's Exhibit F to the application.
Okay.
And then under section 5, oh, I'm sorry. That was observed. Figure 5-1, proposed plant material. So Eastern cedar, American holly, and Virginia pine.
Which page are you on?
Page 9 of the landscape plan. Page 10 of 93 of Exhibit F.
And so, do you believe those are the final decisions?
I wouldn't say final. There could be particular landowners that request different species, different natives and/or deciduous species. We particularly use evergreen so that you're getting the year-round blockage. Some landowners might want to shake that up a little bit with some deciduous trees, and
Okay.
I'm sure Lightsource would agree to that.
My next question is about some of the noise receptors, and so I think you will need to pull up two different documents that you have. The first is the response to the BBC report in the other issues section. And then the other is the response to staff's first request for information, item 35. In particular, the part of that request, item 35, is the table.
Could you repeat the first one again, please?
I'm sorry, the response, the first is the response to the BBC report, the other issues section.
So I've got supplemental responses to first request.
And
And then the other one is supplemental responses to first request, is that correct?
yes,
All right,
item 35, the table.
Okay. Tab 28.
Tab 25.
For the first questions?
The supplemental responses is tab 25, and the response to the consultant's report is 29.
29. Okay.
So the response to the consultant's report, particularly about the noise receptor R242, the response stated that it's over 500 feet from the nearest panel and would not experience sound at 78 decibels during pile driving. But it also acknowledges the BBC report is correct and that there are 19 noise receptors within 600 feet that would be experiencing noise between 74 and 76 decibels. So when you look at the chart in item 35, the supplemental response, item 35, it lists R242 as being 380 feet. So which is the correct one? Is the table correct for R242 or the response to the consultant's report?
So this is where it gets a little muddy in that the first submittal had the 5% design,
Okay,
and then the second submittal had the 10% design. And I think where things got sideways between the third-party consultant's report and these supplemental responses is we were looking at data from report number 1 and/or data from report number 2 and and pointing out the graphic for layout at the 5% rather than the graphic at the 10%. So we're not looking at apples to apples, I guess is what I'm saying. So the secondary response is given using the 10% design,
okay,
and we reran those receptors.
okay. So you believe that the BBC report, when they were doing their analysis, they were looking at the 5% design for the distances to the receptors?
The 5% design and possibly the 10% tables. They were getting them swapped,
Okay,
or intermingled, I guess would be the proper word.
But if they were using the 10% tables, then that would be in line with the response, right?
I guess let's focus on one response, and then let me speak to just that response, maybe.
Let me ask this question.
Okay.
Is it your understanding that the 10% layout is what is before the siting board for approval?
No, I do not believe. As what Mr. Steele stated earlier, as for approval is the larger, I think, 635 acre footprint is what's up in
Well,
front of
that's the
us.
entire footprint, but the proposed positioning of all the facilities within that footprint are along the lines of the 10% plan. Is that not correct?
Currently as they stand,
Well,
yes.
it has to be at least somewhat static for us to be able to rule on it.
Right.
So, the distances of the anticipated facilities to noise receptors, as it stands today, subject to apparent possible changes, are those distances to noise receptors and the anticipated sound of those receptors on construction and operational, on a construction and an operational basis, are those distances and sound levels in the record?
Correct. I believe the 10% design more accurately reflects operational and construction noise.
Okay, so where is the 10% noise in the record?
It was a supplement, it was the second response, I believe. There's a table, a new map was delivered with new tables showing, one of the questions was distance to panel, distance to inverter, distance to substation.
Okay, so I've got an 11-page response to data request number 1-35. Is that what you're responding to? The Telesto receptor locations and nearest inverter or substation with distance?
There are several, so I don't want to misspeak, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, this one was provided on September the 20th. One month before the responses, the response to the consultant's report.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, are you talking about, does it say up at the top, supplemental response to Public Service Commission's first request for information? Also, apologies about it not saying citing board.
Okay, yes, it's an 11-page document.
Okay, and so that's what we're talking about. So,
So-
Mr. Martin, is the tab 25 document.
25.
So my question is, there is a 4-page table, 4 pages of response, 3 pages of tables, starting on page 2 of that response. And the table is Telesto Solar Project, receptor locations, and nearest inverter or substation with distance. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. Is this the table that reflects the site layout in front of the sighting board.
No,
Okay. So,
I don't think.
I think it is.
well,
If
so,
these maps, I'm sorry, if the maps that follow the tables are one and the same. Exhibit H, 14.
so here's why I asked. This is the last table with this type of information provided prior to the applicant's response to the consultant's report, where it said the consultant was wrong or was using mismatched numbers, and that 242 is more than 500 feet away. That's just a fact. Like, I'm looking at I've got the record in front of me. This table shows 242 at 380 feet
The nearest panel.
to the nearest panel.
If this is the latest submittal to our response, there were two tables submitted. There was a first response table, and then there was a second response table.
This was provided on September 20th, and since then, there is not a table that I can find that includes this type of information. No tables. So I'm trying to figure out where the BBC report was wrong. What documentary evidence in the record indicates that BBC was provided this information and is mistaken?
The receptors were relabeled from layout 5% to layout 10%. So therefore, 242 in the first table may not be 242 in the second table. That's one thing we probably need to clarify. Secondly, we used 2021 aerial photography because of the new builds in the new neighborhood up in the northeast corner. We wanted to make sure we accurately reflected that.
Well, but that shouldn't have, did that change the layout? I'm just wondering why that would change the 242 distance to a panel by at least 100 and more than 120 feet.
We removed a whole section of panels in the northeast corner away
Okay.
from that neighborhood. We took them off the table.
Okay.
So that took that 242 and did this.
So let me ask this then. Do you have the information for the noise levels of all of the receptors within 1,000 feet under the 10% design plan?
Yes.
Okay. So we need that as a posterior neighborhood.
It's in one of these binders. I'm not able to locate it quickly.
You can continue this.
That was my line of questioning. So, again, I have not found it in the record, but again, as a post-hearing data request, we would request the new table with the 1,000 feet sound contour. And that's all I have.
Deputy Secretary, you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin, thank you for the response on the karst. I think that covers what I was asking there. However, I did generally want to ask about phase one and the other documents we've yet to receive. Let's start with the phase one. I assume y'all did a desk audit of various agencies and whatnot to, before you did a field review. Did you all review KGS records for this site?
The Kentucky Geological Society,
Yes, sir.
we reviewed that as an add-on to the natural resource report, which we pulled the map, which is in one of the supplemental requests. That is from GS for karst. We did not do it as part of the phase one. We did it as part of the natural resource review.
The environmental cumulative assessment? Is that what you're referring to?
We typically do a critical issues analysis, an upfront document, which kind of does a screening of the site. We do a lot of that work up front there. Because of the question, we did further study into KGS and submitted a map showing known karst activity in the area.
Okay. I'm more interested in oil and gas wells. I did a quick review of the area in the KGS records, and there appears there were at least 7 probably gas wells drilled back in the 60s and 70s on this property. I was wondering if the phase one found any evidence of those, whether they had been properly abandoned or not.
Right. I do not have the phase one in front of me, so I don't know the specific answer to that. We use, for this particular study, we use Eris, a third-party company, to pull all the EDR, the environmental database reports, and oil and gas well information. All that information is then put into the phase one report. That is something we could supply as a data request.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for improperly abandoned wells, I guess I should say, to be evident below surface level in agricultural fields. And this is primarily where they are all showing up. There's at least 7 that's in the KGS records. Of course, we have interest in that from our abandoned well plugging program as well. There are 14,000 in Kentucky, and Hardin County has its fair share. But a related question that you may not know, and maybe I'm not sure who would answer it, but have there been any mineral rights investigation done of this property, and who owns the mineral rights, and so on and so forth?
I do not know the answer to that.
Do you know who would know the answer, perhaps?
Potentially.
Or would you?
Potentially Jack Steele.
Okay, thank you. As far as the jurisdictional waters and the threatened endangered species, I'll just generally ask, Mr. Martin, was there anything unusual found through that? I wouldn't expect so, but I thought I'd ask.
Nothing unusual. Everything was mapped. We're doing a preliminary jurisdictional determination with the Corps of Engineers, and we've put setbacks on all streams and wetlands found within the site. We've also informally consulted with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on mussels and bats. Particularly, there are 6 areas where we're going to cross fence row tree lines, thin tree lines, and a couple places where we're going to need culverts for streams. We went out after the fact and went and looked at those specifically for roost habitat, as well as a preliminary survey for mussel presence, and found none. And we recorded no potential roosting trees in the corridors proposed for right-of-way. That information was then sent to Fish and Wildlife for concurrence.
Okay. All right, thank you. No other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montgomery, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Regan?
No questions. Thanks.
Mr. Dutton, any redirect?
Not for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being here today.
Your Honor, with your permission, I think it may be helpful to recall Jack Steele just for a moment to clarify exactly what the application is seeking here.
That'll be fine.
Can I have just a minute before I do so?
Sure, let's take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you.
you'd like to recall a witness.
Yes, please, Your Honor. I'd like to recall Mr. Jack Steele.
Okay, Mr. Steele, please come to the stand. Just remind you, you're still under oath. You may ask.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Steele, can I ask which map you're looking at in front of you right now?
Yes, this is the 10% design set.
Okay. So I want to be clear about just which map it is that you're looking to get approved and which portions of it. I think during the last round of questioning, even I got confused, and I may have misspoke. So can you please, for the record, clarify just what it is that Telesto is seeking to have approved?
Yes, yes, and it is a little confusing given the maps we've provided, but what we are asking for approval on is the red boundary shown in the 10% design set. So there are panel locations shown on the 10% design set, and then in addition to that, there are some areas that do not include panels within them, but that are within that red boundary shown. That is the area that we're seeking approval for.
And is it correct that the original sound study is based on this red outline?
That is correct.
Okay, and so the information contained in the original sound study based on this red outline is the accurate information for the site plan that you are proposing to have approved, is that correct?
That is correct.
And is it your understanding that some of the subsequent discovery responses dealt specifically with the panels shown in this study because those discovery questions specifically asked about sort of these panel locations, is that correct?
Yes, they were specific to the panel locations, not specific to the red boundary or the entirety of the area that we're seeking approval for.
Okay, and if we could, let's talk about noise receptor 242 real quick. And if I can, I'd like to refer you to our response to the consultant's report. That's tab 29 in your binder. Specifically the last page, the second paragraph on the last page. So is it your understanding that 242 is used by the BBC report is not the same location as 242 that was in the original sound study and the follow-up sound information?
Yes, that's my understanding. Because the 242 that is referenced in the BBC report is actually not a sensitive noise receptor. It's a barn.
So the 242 that we originally used is the house, and then when they redid their measurements, they actually measured from the barn, not the house. Is that correct?
That is my understanding.
Can you clarify, Mr. Dutton, who the pronoun is referring to in that question?
Yes, apologies.
When they did the study?
Apologies. Is it your understanding that when BBC did their consultant's report, in order to verify the Telesto sound study, that BBC, I'm sure unintentionally, measured to the barn and not to the actual house that is labeled as 242?
That is my understanding and seems to be the case.
I have no further questions.
All right, so let me ask a question here. Do you have a copy of the sound, of the table that indicates the sound, the receptor locations and nearest inverter or substation with distance?
I'm sure, yes, I'm sure it's in here somewhere.
Okay, so it's first request, it's a supplemental response to first request for information, request number 35.
That's tab 25, Jack.
Yes.
Are you there? And you see the first RFI, request number 35 is what the first page says at the top.
I'm looking at the chart.
Okay, well, go to the page before that, so that we're sure we're on the same page. Keep going back. I can see that you got a chart. There should be the chart is a attachment to a data request or a request for information. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it's first RFI request number 35 that starts with refer to Exhibit H, Appendix A, pages 16 through 17. You see that?
What I'm looking at is first RFI request number 23.
You gotta go a couple more pages.
Ah, there it is. I'm
There
sorry.
you go. The next page starts refer to Exhibit H.
Yes.
Okay, so that refer to Exhibit H is part of the application. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So then it says, provide the distances from the source of sound to each noise receptor within 1,000 feet using the receptor IDs in Appendix A. Okay, so this is referring to the application, right? Then the response, the 3 pages, 4 pages after, is a table.
Yes.
Okay. So the question referenced the application. Is the attached table the 5%? Well, let me take a step back. Was the 5% map the map that was included in the application?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of an August 23 filing of the attached 10% design layout plan?
Yes.
Okay. You would agree that that was subsequent to the application?
Yes.
Okay. So, this table, does it refer to the 5% layout plan or the 10% layout plan?
This table refers to the This table refers to the red boundary in the 10% design.
But why does, so here's what I don't get. You keep talking about the boundary.
Boundary.
Yeah.
Why does the boundary matter? I asked Mr. Martin about this, and he was responding, well, the boundary panel. The distances are to the panels.
Sure.
You would agree that the panels have nothing to do with the red boundary other than they are within the red boundary.
Yes.
Okay, so is it the layout in the 10% plan or the layout in the 5% plan that this table represents?
The 10%.
Okay, so if you will go to the last page of that table and you
Yes.
look at 242,
Yes.
how many feet does it say it is to the nearest, that receptor is to the nearest panel array in feet?
It says 380 feet.
That is the amount that the BBC report reflects, correct?
I believe so.
You just got a question about that from Mr. Dutton. Would you agree?
Yes.
So it's your measurement that's 380 feet.
It seems that is the case, yes.
Okay. So where in the record can I find this table that says 500 feet along the lines of what you all said in your response to the consultant's report?
I am not sure. And if it doesn't exist, then yeah, that will need to be made a constraint.
Do you have a copy of the response to the consultant's report that you can look at?
Your Honor, some of these may be better questions for Chad Martin too, since he put a lot.
I already
of this-
tried to ask these questions to Mr. Martin. So do you all have a copy of the response to the staff or to the consultant's report that Mr. Steele can look at?
Yes. It's 29.
Yeah, I've got the response to the
Okay, and
consultant
so
report.
that discussion that we were just having
Yeah.
is on page 8 of the response to the consultant's report.
Okay,
Just let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
You see the paragraph that starts with third?
Yes.
All right, so tell me if I read this wrong. Third, the BBC report stated that sensitive receptor R242 could experience noise levels up to 78 dBA during pile driving activity due to its 380-foot proximity. My battery's about to die, so that's not part of it. 380-foot proximity to the nearest solar panel. To clarify this inconsistency, the BBC report appears to have measured the distance from a recreational vehicle garage or barn. The R242 residence measures over 500 feet from the nearest panel and thus will not experience the 78 dBA noise level during pile driving activities as noted in the BBC report. If you'll also go up to the paragraph above it, top of that page, there's a sentence that says, Telesto points to the 10% design plan. filed on August 23rd, and that's, quote, to clarify the alleged contradiction in the distances. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have a copy? Can Mr. Dutton point you to the filing that was made on August 23rd, 2022?
What was the name of that filing?
August 23rd, 2022.
Yeah, we don't have it by dates, I'm sorry,
Oh,
we have it by pleading name.
Notice of filing and attached 10% design layout plan with cover letter.
That should be 23.
23.
And just let me know when you're there.
Okay. I'm there.
Would you agree that that's a 3-page filing?
Yes.
Would you agree the first page is a notice signed by an attorney?
By Katie Eckert, yes.
Yep. The second page is a map,
Correct.
and the third page is a map,
Correct.
and it does not include a table that provides anything related to sound between noise receptors and panels or any other facilities located in the project footprint?
Correct.
Mr. Dutt, do you have any other questions?
Can I have a moment?
Sure. No, they're already here. I haven't even touched one. Would you like one? No. The last thing I need after Halloween.
I want it all out of my house. I'm bringing it all here this week. Did you take them trick or treating?
We just knew we would do better if we were at the house.
Yeah, this may be easier to address some of these questions if I can recall Chad Martin.
Okay, that'd be fine. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Steele?
No, sir.
Mr. Lyons, Deputy Secretary, and Mr. Montgomery, any questions for Mr. Steele?
Was Mr. Steele going to address the mineral rights question, or was that, I didn't really know what was going to happen with that?
I can address it. Would you mind re-asking the question?
Yes, sir. Just have you all checked on mineral rights for that area? Who owns it, and what may be the extent of mineral rights, whether it's severed or whether the surface owners actually have mineral rights?
Yeah, we ran a mineral rights ownership report in all cases, and in all cases, the landowners own the minerals, and we will not be. We'll be leasing the surface only.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Or you may be excused, Mr. Steele.
Thank you.
Mr. Dutton?
Yes, I'd like to recall Mr. Chad Martin.
All right, Mr. Martin, I'll remind you, you're still under oath. Mr. Dutton, do you have any questions?
I do. Mr. Martin, with the benefit of some time to look at these pleadings and the filings that were referenced by the chairman, in regards to the response to the consultant's report and the distances, the 380 and the 500 feet, can you explain what the discrepancy is?
So I believe the discrepancy is the question from the third-party consultant's report was based on the original noise study and the table here in this binder. The response to the question was, and that was the 5% design. The response to that question was answered using data from the 10% design. So it changed, and things got remeasured, and those distances are now no longer the 380, they're in the 450 to 500 range.
So what is the appropriate distance based on the layout as Telesto is asking for it to be approved?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So we've got essentially 380 and 500 feet. So based on the layout that we're asking to be approved, which is essentially that boundary of the 10% layout, what is the actual distance that the sighting board should be looking at and that we should be referencing?
Per the 5% design, that number is, because they measured from a barn and not the house, it's at 400.
Can I ask clarify, who's the they in the response?
It's my understanding that in the BBC response, they did some of their own measurements and they're questioning back to us. And so I went back and improved some of that, and I understand that that 380 is in our original table. But that 380, after looking at it further, is to the RV port, or to the RV garage, and not to the residence.
Right, so how does that have to do with they? I genuinely don't understand how this has anything to do with what the consultant measured when your report,
Right.
provided in a response to a data request, said that that receptor was 380 feet. How does that have to do with anything that the consultant measured?
It's an inaccurate measurement.
Okay, and so is that table that I was asking about earlier based on the 5% or the 10% map?
5% is my
Well, so
understanding.
the question was based on the application. The application had the 5% map, correct?
That's correct.
So you're saying, you said it just a second ago that the response was based off of the 10% table and the question was based on the 5% table. So now you're saying that the response is also the 5% table. So the response is accurate from when the question was asked. Would you agree?
I'll agree, yes.
Okay, so there is a new measurement that is not 380 feet, correct?
That's my understanding.
And the 380 feet is based on the 5% map. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So is there anywhere in the record the 10% distances and the 10% table that you all have been referencing?
I don't believe so. I don't know.
Okay, that's very helpful. Mr. Dutton?
I have no further questions.
Anything
No,
for this one?
no,
Mr. Lyons, Mr. Montgomery, any follow-up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Do you have any more witnesses, Mr. Dutton?
I do not.
All right, thank you. So this isn't your first rodeo, Mr. Dutton. You know what happens post-hearing. We're gonna have some data requests. We do have, we are going to have data requests. This is when it happens. They wrote the statute and the regulations not particularly well. So.
I had noticed.
I know I'm not letting you in on anything necessarily new. But the reality is that we can have an evidentiary hearing, have questions post evidentiary hearing, but it's already a defined period for you to do a brief, right? So regardless of the amount of time that you need to respond to post-hearing data requests. So we can probably get our post-hearing data requests done before the end of the week.
Okay.
We'll give ourselves Friday,
Yeah,
just
that's
so that we
fine.
can get it through the signature process. Would 2 weeks be enough for your response?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
So I have, Friday will be November the 4th, and your responses will be November the 18th. Okay.
That's perfect.
Actually, can I make it 17th? Could you all get them responded to by the 17th?
I think so, yes.
Okay. And if you need additional time for any of the particular responses, just please ask for it in enough time, but also be specific to those that you need additional time to.
Certainly.
I'd rather
Will
you
do.
file what you have and follow up on it. It's either the statutes or the regulations. I think it's the regulations. Already provide for a brief within 7 days of the evidentiary hearing. It's certainly your prerogative and your client's prerogative whether you want to file a brief. I speak for myself, only one of the 6 members of the citing board. I would be interested in the legal position of counsel on the issue of the planning and zoning, since it has been raised a couple of times throughout the proceeding. You all have raised it a couple of times. One of the specific considerations that we have to one of the criteria that we have to base our decision off of in 7.0, maybe 7.10, whatever it is specifically on whether the proposed project complies with applicable planning and zoning requirements at the time the application is filed. So you're welcome to not file anything, but it may behoove you to want to take your opportunity to provide a legal brief on that front.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, Deputy Secretary Lyons, Mr. Montgomery, any questions?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Regan, anything?
Nothing?
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Dutton?
I think that's it for us.
Council?
Nothing.
All right, with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.